I'm not on. We're good to go? Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to another. Please be seated. Welcome to another Discovering History session, our second for March, or it's History Month. We're really excited to have everyone back. Hello, and welcome to everybody who is on YouTube today. We've also hopefully tagged as well, so we'll be able to share that with them. This is live stream, but also recorded, so it's on our YouTube channel for anybody to take a look at whenever they would like to. Before I introduce Stephanie, I want to say that we do have two speakers in April. So Friday, April 3rd is Bob Mergel, who is talking about America's airships, the dirigibles. Ohio is known as the birthplace of aviation. We're kind of fitting into the 250 theme there. And then on Friday, April 17th, we have author Rick Sheffield with his new book on false promises, the struggle for Black voting rights in 1800s Ohio. So we're really excited to have both of them here. Thank you, as always, to the Washington County Public Library for working with us on this Discovering History series. And today in particular with the castle. We got Stephanie in town for the whole day. We're keeping her busy all day long. She's going to have more Marietta than she probably.
I love Marietta. I have no problem coming down here anytime.
That's great. Let me go ahead and read Stephanie's bio to you. We first started working together a while ago. I can't remember what was the first thing. Oh, they did the Jackie Kennedy talk, and then they had their project with the kiosk, the First Lady's kiosk that we had upstairs in January, and then I took it to McKinley, and then it went. It's traveling around Ohio. So, Stephanie, it's Bohnak, right?
It's Bohnak.
Bohnak.
That's okay. I'm
not introducing you this evening. We'll let Kyle do that. Stephanie Bohnak, Director of Education and Curatorial Services. As the director of Education and Curatorial Services for the National First Ladies Library and Museum at the First Ladies National Historic Site, Stephanie brings a distinguished background and unwavering dedication to the institution. With an MA in History and Public History from Bowling Green State University, specializing in women's history and American enslavement, Stephanie is dedicated to illuminating often overlooked narratives in American history. Her BA in History from the University of Akron, accompanied by minors in anthropology and classics, provides a comprehensive understanding of historical contexts and concepts. Additionally, she holds an AS in Culinary Arts from Sullivan University. Did not know that for this evening, reflecting a diverse skill set that enriches educational endeavors with interdisciplinary perspectives. In this role, Stephanie leads educational programming and outreach while assisting in collections management and curation, ensuring exhibits are both engaging and historically accurate. Through innovative programming and research, exhibits, and outreach, Stephanie honors the legacies of America's First Ladies while fostering historical literacy and inclusivity for all. Please welcome Stephanie Bohnak.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for having me today. As I said, I love coming down to Marietta. One, it's a really easy drive, so thanks for that. And then two, I just think it is such a beautiful and historic town. And as a historian and an Ohioan, born and bred, I love getting to see every piece and corner of this great state and all the parts of history that maybe we don't talk about in a larger scale. And if you ever do want to talk food, as Aaron said, I have a background in culinary arts. I'd love to talk food history anytime. You just let me know. I have my card on the table here. I also have some additional information about the National First Ladies Library and Museum in Canton, Ohio. And I do have a very small sampling of our gift shop with me today. Should you be interested in engaging more with First Ladies history, artifacts, and Ohio history as a whole. So I just want to start with an introduction, and I also want to talk a little bit more about our site. But first and foremost, I have some free tickets to give away, which is always a fun way to start, and we keep things light. Who can tell me one First Lady from the great state of Ohio? Yeah, okay, well, that's great, because she's our hometown hero. She's in Canton, Ohio. This ticket, in fact, is to tour her childhood home and historic birthplace. Okay. Mrs. Hayes, yes. This is just prep for later tonight. So if you're joining me at the castle, you'll kind of already have an idea of who I'm going to be talking about this evening. Any First Ladies from Ohio? Who said Taft? Yes, Nellie Taft. I don't want to spoil anything about her because, again, I will talk about that tonight, but just think cherry blossoms. Any other first ladies? Which one? I'll take it. I'll take it. Yes, Anna Harrison. Yes, Anna Harrison. We share her with New Jersey and the great state of Indiana as well. Sorry?
Grant's wife?
You know, it's tough because Julia Grant is actually one of our southern-born first ladies. She never lived in Ohio. That being said, I'll give you a ticket anyway, because she's still a pretty incredible first lady to learn about, and Grant is very much Ohioan through and through himself. So she's kind of our honorary 8th first lady. Yeah, yes. Wait, I already gave you a ticket, didn't I?
You did.
Do you want one for a friend?
Sure.
Okay, great. Yes, Lucretia Garfield.
Did somebody say Hayes?
We did say Hayes, yes. So we've listed off Anna Harrison, Lucy Hayes, Lucretia Garfield, Nellie Taft, Ida McKinley. We're just missing 2. I know. There's a lot of first ladies in the great state of Ohio.
What to start with?
So it could either be starting with a C, that's her first name, or an F is the other first lady's first name. Close.
I don't know the first names.
Okay, last names include H. They both actually are H. So there's 2 H's left for last names. Harding, who said Harding? Florence Harding, the first incumbent first lady who got to cast a vote following the passage of the 19th Amendment. She's pretty awesome. I think I heard Caroline Harrison over here as well, did I not? I think I heard Caroline Harrison. Yes, so that's all 7 first ladies. If you are joining me tonight at the castle, please be prepared to learn more about them because they are extraordinary. If you had a chance to enjoy our kiosk when it was down here, I hope you got a chance to see some of their clothing, accessories. If not, my slides tonight include just a snippet of those as well. Now, that being said, if you are joining me tonight, I apologize for any double dipping. A lot of our first ladies from Ohio were also first ladies during our Gilded Age, which is what I'm going to be talking about today. Oh gosh, I apologize. That is not what it's supposed to look like. Now that being said, when First Lady Lucy Hayes, who we've talked about, I'm so sorry, that's really upsetting. Maybe. All right, that's fine. We'll just get away from that slide. I'm not happy with that. Now when First Lady Lucy Hayes arrived in Washington, D.C. on a cold March morning, probably very much like this morning, in 1877, she exuded grace and resilience despite her husband's election still being contested at a larger level. The election of 1876 not only abruptly ended the Reconstruction era, but also it ushered in a new age, the Gilded Age. So if you've watched the HBO special, I'm talking glitz, glam, and corruption. Now, this era was defined by corruption, rapid immigration, and stark social divides. Although it is often romanticized in literature and film, the period seems to be glamorous only for the elite. For the working class, life was marked by labor strikes, wage disparity, often unsafe working conditions, while industrial titans amassed staggering wealth and politicians profited from backroom deals. Yet amid these struggles, movements for women's rights, temperance, racial progress further gained momentum throughout this era. Within this shifting landscape, First Ladies played a vital role. Some, like Frances Cleveland and Ellen Arthur, reflected the era's social norms, while others, including Lucy Hayes, Lucretia Garfield, Caroline Harrison, and Ida McKinley, took on causes to help alleviate suffering, leaving a lasting impact on American history. So that's going to be what I'm talking about today. I'm going to be talking about all these first ladies who served from about 1877 until the year 1900. Now, I also want to highlight our site a bit here. Show of hands, who has seen and been to visit the National First? Well, that's great. I love that. That's great. Sometimes people don't even know we exist. I was in Mount Vernon at the top of the month, and several people didn't even know we existed. So the National First Ladies Library Museum at the First Ladies National Historic Site is the only site in the world that is completely dedicated to sharing the lives and legacies of our nation's First Ladies. And it's right here in your backyard, or I guess maybe your front yard, depending on what direction you're visiting us from. In mid-1990s, our founder, Mary Regula, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the Regula name. Mary Regula was wife of Congressman Ralph Regula, who served our district where we are located. And when she was a young woman, she would actually listen to Eleanor Roosevelt on the radio during the Great Depression and was very inspired by her. When she got to her undergrad studies, she was really interested in First Lady Mary Lincoln and couldn't find a lot, if any, historical research on her. And if she did, it was part of a chapter in an Abraham Lincoln biography, claims of her being insane, talks of her fashion, and it was very minimal. So Mary Regula decided in the mid-1990s there needed to be one spot that we could talk about every First Lady, not just a panel at a presidential library, not just a chapter in a book, but one place solely dedicated to these incredible and forward-thinking women. In 2000, then, we joined with the National Park Service and became the 380th unit of the National Park Service as a historic site. So those of you that have tickets, when you come and see us, if you have a National Parks passport, feel free to bring it. We'll stamp it for you there as well. Sorry. I guess I'm not as tech savvy as I wanted. And I apologize that my slides are looking this way. I don't... Thank you. Thank you. Now, so you've heard the term the Gilded Age. Does anyone know why that even came about? So the term first came from Mark Twain, actually, in 1873 from a book titled The Gilded Age that he co-wrote with another author. And in doing so, he described the era where corruption and greed were masked by a thin gilt layer of wealth and progress. Following the Civil War and the Reconstruction period, the United States underwent rapid industrialization, major urban expansion, and as I've already alluded to, mass migration of peoples and immigration of peoples. However, these advancements often came at a cost. There was severe economic inequality, political corruption, and exploitation of laborers. The Panic of 1873 in particular triggered a deep economic recession, which led companies to slash wages, particularly in the railroad and steel industries. The economic strain led to the Great Railroad Strike of 1877, the first major labor uprising in U.S. history, setting the stage for future industrial conflicts and labor movements. Struggles between workers and industry leaders escalated, culminating in violent clashes like the Homestead Strike of 1892. Despite these hardships, the Gilded Age was a pivotal moment in shaping America's role on the world stage, influencing the nation's evolving democracy and political structures, and social movements that would actually carry on throughout the next few centuries. Excellent. I went the right way this time. As industrial capitalism flourished, social Darwinism emerged as a justification for this economic inequality, arguing that wealth and power were natural rewards for the most fit and wealthy individuals. This belief reinforced a political and economic system where industrial magnates wielded significant influence over lawmakers and politicians, often securing policies themselves that protected their own business interests. Meanwhile, workers facing poor working conditions and low wages began forming unions to seek better treatment, pay, and hours. Although these labor movements were disorganized at first and lacked legal protections, they laid the foundation for future workers' rights advancements and reforms that we still enjoy today. Beyond labor issues, the era saw growing calls for social reform at large. Middle-class activists championed causes like temperance, women's suffrage, and racial equality, though often some historians argue with a paternalistic mindset that framed these groups as needing guidance rather than simply just granting them equal rights. This belief extended beyond domestic issues influencing U.S. foreign policy, and justified as a civilizing mission, American expansionism led to the subjugation of indigenous peoples within newly acquired territories, reinforcing some imperialistic ideals that would also shape the nation's global role for decades to come. So you can imagine that being First Lady during this time is a complex role in itself, not to imagine what's happening both domestically, but internationally as well. So during the Gilded Age, as I said, industries boomed, cities seemed to pop up overnight, smokestacks appeared, railroads connected the entire nation, and new innovations like the telegraph and eventually the telephone would further connect this growing and expansive nation. The first ladies that lived during this era themselves exuded reform, tradition, as well as progress and quiet leadership. Lucy Webb Hayes was born in Chillicothe, Ohio, and was the youngest of 3 children in a family with a complex legacy regarding enslavement. Her father, Dr. James Webb, sought to break this legacy by working to emancipate those he had inherited, but ultimately contracted cholera during his trip to Kentucky to fulfill this mission and passed away when young Lucy was just 2 years old. Left in the care of her widowed mother, Maria Cook, Lucy Webb demonstrated resilience and promise from a very early age. Despite the social limitations placed on women of her time, Lucy Webb received an exceptional education. She attended the Chillicothe Female School and later enrolled at Ohio Wesleyan University, where she was only permitted to do so as she studied alongside her brothers, thus breaking barriers for women in education around the nation. Influenced by her grandfather's values, Lucy also developed a strong commitment to temperance, which would later earn her the nickname, as I'm sure this will sound familiar, Lemonade Lucy, following her time in the White House. In 1850, Lucy Webb graduated from the Cincinnati Wesleyan Female College, becoming the first in American history First Lady to earn a college degree. Her writings and beliefs reflected her commitment to gender equality and social reform, and she actively engaged in early women's rights movements. She once wrote during her college days that, quote, instead of being considered the slave of man, she is considered his equal in all things and his superior in some. Although her marriage to Rutherford B. Hayes in 1852 shifted her focus towards family responsibilities, she remained dedicated to advocating for equal rights and the need for social change. It's gonna kill me. It's gonna kill me. I apologize. Following her marriage to Rutherford B. Hayes, Lucy herself devoted to family and home, while she still championed her values of equality and social justice. We know that she was strongly and morally opposed to enslavement, and it's believed to have actually influenced her husband and family to reflect these beliefs. She maintained an abolitionist principle throughout her entire life. It is actually believed that Mrs. Hayes took an active role in teaching their free black servant Eliza Jane to read and write, reflecting her commitment to education and empowerment for all women. During the Civil War, Lucy Hayes gained the affectionate nickname Mother Lucy due to her unwavering support for the Union soldiers serving under her husband in the Ohio 23rd Volunteer Infantry. She often visited her husband in the field, providing emotional and practical support, even in the face of personal risk and danger. It was during this time when she would visit these encampments that unfortunately the Hayeses would lose 2 of their children due to the unsanitary conditions in these camps. A compassionate and dedicated advocate, Lucy Hayes ministered to wounded soldiers, offered medical assistance, mended uniforms, and even did so by bringing her own sewing machine to the battlefields. Her commitment to supporting veterans continued as First Lady of Ohio, where she established an orphanage for the children of Civil War veterans. This became one of her primary statewide causes and something she would later build on as First Lady of the United States. At the White House, Lucy Hayes' warm hospitality and commitment to her causes earned her popularity and respect. Despite that less than warm welcome in D.C. in March of 1877, she, by the time she ended her term, became, quote, the most widely known and popular president's wife the country had known thus far in American history. She actively supported charities in Washington, D.C., she promoted her former initiatives, and she even sponsored scholarships for students of color at the National Deaf-Mute College. After serving as First Lady of the United States, Lucy Hayes returned to the family home Spiegel Grove in Fremont, Ohio, where she lived until her passing in 1889 at the age of 59. Now, what I want to do in this program is I also want to show you some of the fashion of the era, because that's what a lot of people are interested in, is how the ebbs and flows of women's fashion also reflect what our First Ladies of the United States were wearing. So Lucy Hayes' attire kind of embodies this bridging between the Civil War era and the Gilded Age. So you'll note here this beautiful mourning capelet that is using a brocade style to give it that pattern, as well as one of my personal favorite artifacts, this 2-piece brown tea dress that we know she wore in 1877 when she was First Lady of the United States. Was she really that skinny? Yes, folks, we actually, when we put this on display, have to remove stuffing out of our mannequins because her waistline is so thin that it actually will pop the buttons. She was really that skinny and that petite. Now, that being said, what you're seeing on the side here, this is known as a bustle. You'll see this come about a lot throughout the Gilded Age. That is kind of the haute fashion of the time. We're so used to the hourglass figure in our modern sense. Well, in the Gilded Age, the S shape was the most popular silhouette a woman could have. Chairs were even specifically designed to accommodate women in larger gowns like this. So if you go to historic homes and you notice a gentleman's chair and a lady's chair, his will have armrests, hers will not, to accommodate her bodice and bustle. Also, you'll see one of her bonnets. It is exquisite. It's a black velvet bonnet with green and black and some red plumes, as well as a beautiful coral flower on the side. Bonnets are also at this time the height of women's fashion and are often ornate. Speaking of ornate, you'll see some additional pieces of jewelry that are attributed to and believed to have belonged to Lucy Webb Hayes, including a mother of pearl pin at the top you see there. It is supposed to be kind of a progressive symbol, although the tip of the pointer finger that is supposed to be pointing forward has unfortunately broken off. And then you'll also see a gold brooch with the silhouette of a Roman soldier, which actually was a very popular trend at the time, was Roman and Greek history and mythology. I apologize. I don't know if it's when I downloaded it. I am so sorry. I'm a perfectionist, if you can't tell, so this is driving me bonkers. Now, Lucretia Rudolph Garfield, was affectionately known as Crete to her friends and followers, and was born near Garrettsville, Ohio. She is remembered for being a highly educated woman and a passionate advocate for equality. Growing up in a family that valued both religion and education, Crete learned the dual responsibilities of farm life and household management from an early age. Described as petite with high cheekbones, dark hair, and eyes, she was recognized for her intelligence, though her reserved and serious demeanor often led others to misinterpret her as cold. Historians attribute this to her upbringing, which, while loving, was not overtly publicly affectionate. In fact, Lucretia Garfield once remembered that she was hugged and kissed infrequently by her mother and could not remember being hugged or kissed by her own father. Now, that being said, the family was very loving. They were just a bit more reserved about their affection. Now, Lucretia Rudolph's love of books was profound and something that lasted her entire lifetime. She once said, "It would be of about as much use to stop breathing as to let books alone if they are anywhere in the region about me. I have to read as I have to live." Her academic journey and her love of books took her to the Geauga Seminary and later to the newly established Western Reserve Eclectic Institute in Hiram, Ohio, which is now known today as the official Hiram College. It was here that she first became acquainted with future President James A. Garfield, and she initially viewed him as, quote, "an overgrown, uncombed, unwashed boy." Now, that being said, we know that Lucretia Rudolph eventually changed her tune and recognized that James Garfield was, in fact, a very brilliant man, and the two began courting, and this courtship blossomed over the span of 1,200 handwritten letters between the two. Following their marriage in 1858, the Garfields faced numerous personal challenges, particularly during what they would eventually refer to as the dark years. James Garfield's legal career and his involvement in the Civil War placed significant strain on their relationship, which was then exasperated by the tragedy and loss of their firstborn child, Eliza Arabella, nicknamed Little Trot, who died in 1863. However, this loss prompted the couple to reconcile and deepen their commitment to one another, as well as to their family. Both devoted to education, they took a very active role in their children's upbringing and academic advancement. Despite her dedication to teaching and her own love of her independence, Lucretia Garfield was ultimately prepared to sacrifice her career in education for her marriage, reflecting complex dynamics for women of her time, where it was expected that if you became married, you gave up your job to provide opportunity for fellow single women. Intellectual at heart, Lucretia Garfield, like other first ladies, became her husband's largest supporter and often her political advisor. Her term as First Lady of the United States was very short-lived as she fell gravely ill with malaria in early 1881, leading her to take respite at a seaside resort. She returned to Washington, D.C. in July of that year at the news that her husband, President James A. Garfield, had been shot at the Potomac Railroad station. This assassination attempt resulted in at least an 80-day period in which doctors attempted to remove the bullet in hopes of saving his life. During this time, his beloved wife barely recovered herself, tirelessly attended to her husband, and nursed him, earning universal admiration and respect. Among the doctors attending to her husband was Dr. Susan Edson, the Garfield family doctor, a female surgeon, and it is believed her homeopathic solutions for the gunshot wound, including the burgeoning germ theory, were overlooked by other male attending surgeons. Despite the best efforts of all attending physicians, James A. Garfield died in September of 1881 as the result of not a bullet wound, but an infected bullet wound. When Congress determined the payment for the late president's doctors, they recommend that all physicians receive $10,000 for their services. Dr. Susan Edson was listed as a nurse and awarded $5,000. Now, although she intended her letter to remain anonymous, Lucretia Garfield insisted that all doctors who attended to her husband be paid equally. And she stated in her letter, which you can see a copy of here, as far as real service was concerned, that rendered by Dr. Rayburn bore no comparison to Miss Edson's, and it seems to me only justice that this discrimination not be made in favor of him. As a result of her efforts, Dr. Susan Edson was eventually awarded the proper recognition and equal pay of $10,000. Now, for the rest of her life, Lucretia Garfield remained dedicated to her husband and his memory. She later added a wing to their house in Menor, Ohio, which is today the site of the historic James A. Garfield site, and then she, in doing so, created the first ever memorial presidential library. Her personal insights and designs for the Garfield Monument, which you can still see today at Lakeview Cemetery, were adhered to, and she maintained relations with other First Ladies, often visiting Frances Cleveland and Ida McKinley in their White House days, before moving to Pasadena, California, where she enjoyed milder winters, which I know we can all appreciate, where she passed away at the age of 85 in 1918. Now, I think Lucretia Garfield really sets us on the path. We're not just in the Civil War era anymore. We are very fully in the Gilded Age. So what you see here, another one of our favorite pieces to show, is a navy blue two-piece tea dress. And I love this. It's so fun. It's beautiful velvet bodice adorned with white flowers, and a matching bonnet that also is velvet adorned with white flowers and then embroidered with those beautiful white flowers again. Again, yes, they are that skinny. Yes, they are that petite. I could never wear their stuff. You'll also see an evening gown, which is, although it is designated as a celery green gown, I understand it might not look celery green at first light, but once you get closer, it is in fact a celery green and cream formal evening gown that is, of course, complete with a bustle. You'll also see a calling card case, which is made out of leather. This is also, although it is faded and looks a little bit more brown, it is also kind of a forest green color and is adorned with silver embellishments. The calling card, although it has been around for generations, experienced a resurgence throughout the Gilded Age as a societal tool, and it's a fun one, to say the least. If you come and see us, there are 2 calling card pieces on display in our current exhibit, so definitely come and see us soon. You'll also see a brooch that's dedicated to her husband, James A. Garfield, and it's not entirely sure if this was a memorial brooch or something that she had made later on in life, but we do know that she wore it, and it seems very of the era. Now, Ellen Herndon Arthur, you've probably never heard of, and a lot of folks haven't, because she never lived to see being First Lady. Ellen Herndon Arthur was born in August of 1837 in Culpeper Courthouse, Virginia, and has often been overlooked, despite her significant role in society during the Gilded Age. As an only child, she epitomized the traditional expectations for elite Southern women, mastering the domestic arts and engaging in lavish entertainment. We also know that she maintained a strong interest and commitment to her local church. Known for her particularly close bond with her mother and her beautiful singing voice, Ellen Herndon was believed to have even befriended former First Lady Dolly Madison when she was a young girl when her family moved to D.C. in 1842. In D.C., Ellen Herndon benefited from her family's wealth and her father's military status, granting access to highly influential circles. After moving to New York City, the family was faced with tragedy at the death of her father, William Herndon, in 1875. In recognition of his service, the Herndon family received several honors, including a public fund and a gold medal from the Commonwealth of Virginia. Following an appropriate Victorian mourning period, another complex element of this time period, Ellen Herndon resumed her active social life and eventually would meet Chester Alan Arthur. That name might sound a little bit more familiar to you all, who was a lawyer and completely enchanted by her singing voice. They married in October of 1859 with what some people believe was a very lavish or over-the-top reception, showcasing the era's opulence. And I do mean it's as extravagant as you can think. There was lobster, there was oysters, there was caviar. It was quite the affair to attend. Now, the couple had 3 children in total, although their first son tragically passed away before turning 3. Ellen Herndon's family wealth allowed Chester A. Arthur to actually ascend within those political and influential circles, ultimately leading to his nomination as the GOP vice presidential candidate in 1880, which we know was aided by his wife's social networking. The couple's social connections are evidenced in her address book, which is preserved by the Library of Congress. Please check it out. It is free to look through. It is so fascinating. In the book, she counted the Vanderbilt family, the Astor family, and the Roosevelts among her closest social friends. Now, Mrs. Arthur's life, however, was marked by personal tragedy and illness. The sudden death of her mother, whom I mentioned they were very close, in April of 1878, profoundly affected Ellen, especially when we understand that she traveled completely alone to retrieve her mother's remains from France, which also contributed to her emotional struggles. And we also know that Chester Arthur refused to make the journey with her. By late 1879, Ellen Arthur was reportedly contemplating getting legal separation from her husband, Chester A. Arthur, but in January of 1880 fell ill with pneumonia and passed away at the age of 42, just as her husband was beginning his rise in the political realm. Therefore, Ellen Arthur never entered the White House, nor did she live to see her husband become President of the United States, and as such, never had the opportunity to officially serve as First Lady of the land. Now, when Chester A. Arthur officially assumed the presidency, it's fine, I'm just going to stop looking. Following the assassination of James A. Garfield in 1881, the absence of a First Lady at this point was so noted that he almost had to have an official White House hostess to take his wife's place. It became very expected in American society that if there was a president, there should always be a First Lady. So you can imagine when President Buchanan was the only bachelor president, there was also that loss keenly felt, and his niece served as hostess. As the 4th president in the United States to enter the White House as a widower, President Arthur initially intended to maintain his late wife's memory by just simply preserving her former home in their family house as she had left it. He honored her wishes even in death, but his health issues soon prompted him to change his approach to the role of First Lady. With his diagnosis of a potentially fatal kidney disease, he appointed his biological sister, Mary Molly Arthur McElroy, to serve as his official White House hostess. Educated at the Emma Willard Seminary in Troy, New York, McElroy was an active member of public life in Albany, where she raised her family. In her new role, she also cared for her niece, Nellie Arthur, while preserving a welcoming atmosphere at the White House during the winter social season. The American press closely followed Mary McElroy's activities, but she differed from previous First Ladies, as she did not participate in many large charity events, nor did she sponsor an independent cause. Instead, she focused on simply supporting her brother's administration and navigating the expectations of the role with tact and unpretentiousness. While she resisted lobbying efforts from the Women's Christian Temperance Union, she later joined the Albany Association opposed to suffrage. Her presence in the White House was still seen as a comforting transition before the next administration. So she kind of breaks with our First Ladies of this era, who many of them were interested in women's suffrage. Mary McElroy was not. She, as many women of the era, believed that through their husbands, women could still enact change, as their husbands had the right to vote. Now, following Chester A. Arthur's death, Mary McElroy continued her care for her niece, and she too eventually passed away during a visit to Atlantic City in New Jersey in January of 1917 at the age of 76. Ellen Herndon Arthur's legacy, though not widely recognized, nor Mary McElroy's, contribute to the foundations of her husband and brother's political journey, as well as societal norms and expectations of the time. And as I said, this is a copy of the address book. Ah, so cool. I'm telling you, just flip through it anytime you get to a computer. Check out the National Archives. It's been very meticulously preserved. We also have very few photos of Ellen Herndon Arthur. So the pictures that I have, if they're not an official portrait, it's these kind of blurry photos from early photography that tells us at least remotely what she looked like. That being said, you can probably imagine, as a highly elite woman, she fully embodied the classiest and finest textiles of Gilded Age fashion. Now, following the Arthur administration, we have a pretty unique First Lady, sometimes referred to as the Jackie Kennedy of her time. Frances Folsom Cleveland is the youngest First Lady in U.S. history, and she married Grover Cleveland in 1886, and this would forever change her life. She was 21 years old. He was 37 years her senior. Although her sister-in-law, Rose Cleveland, had served... I know, right? Every time I say that, I'm like, oof. I'll get to it, I assure you. Yes, I should have paused more. I apologize. You have to process for a minute. You're like, wait, 21, 37. Now, that being said, before Frances Folsom Cleveland became First Lady of the land, it was her sister-in-law, Rose Cleveland, who served as the temporary White House hostess. And as I said, Frances Folsom Cleveland became a media sensation overnight. Born in Buffalo, New York in July of 1864, Frances Folsom is believed to have been taller than 5'7", so she's one of our taller First Ladies, with black hair and blue eyes. After losing her father in a very tragic carriage accident at the age of 9, she grew up under the care of her widowed mother and her younger sister. Grover Cleveland was her father's former law partner and also oversaw the execution of his estates and became a significant guiding force in her life. Frances Folsom began her education at Madame Brecker's French kindergarten and then later attended Wells College, where she cultivated interests in photography, botany, astronomy, and political science. She was also active in theater, debate, and delivered a notable speech on free trade as a member of the Phoenix Society. While many expected Grover Cleveland to propose to the widowed Emma Folsom, who was in his age group, it was in fact Frances, just 21, who captured his heart. You can imagine how her mother felt when they both arrived in D.C., and he said, "No, not you, your daughter." Now, that being said, she was briefly engaged to Cleveland. She prepared for her life as First Lady through a trip to Europe, and then the couple married in the Blue Room in the White House, attracting immense media attention. Upon her move into the White House, Frances, sometimes called Frankie, a nickname that she did not like or approve of, became an instant celebrity and was often mobbed by admirers and the press alike. Similar to future First Lady Jackie Kennedy, as I said, Frances Cleveland frequently graced magazine covers, inspiring fashion and hair trends. That being said, companies exploited her likeness and her image to market various products despite her lack of involvement in these endorsements. The Smithsonian to this day preserves a pack of liver pills that has Frances Cleveland's likeness on it, something that she was never asked permission to be photographed on. Now, that being said, as First Lady, Frances Cleveland aimed to use her influence to uplift working fellow women, and she initiated Saturday morning meetings at the White House for these working class women who otherwise could not visit the White House during the week because of their schedules. She supported young musicians and even sponsored a female violinist to study in Berlin, who became the first ever American to win the prestigious Mendelssohn Stipendium. Although she was not a staunch temperance advocate, Frances Cleveland set an example by declining wine at state dinners, choosing sparkling water instead, so she would have been very on trend today. She supported the Women's Christian Temperance Union and helped to establish the Washington Home for Friendless Colored Girls, showcasing her commitment to diversity and higher education for women. Mrs. Cleveland returned to the White House during Grover Cleveland's second non-consecutive term and is the first First Lady in American history to serve a non-consecutive double term prior to Melania Trump. When she re-entered the White House, it was right during the 1893 recession, and the Cleveland family faced wide public disapproval, and there were even safety concerns as both she and the president received death threats. Despite these challenges, she continued to advocate for causes that felt close to her and her heart, including expressing support for Princess Kaiulani of Hawaii. During her time as First Lady and following the loss of their first daughter, Mrs. Cleveland fell into a Great Depression, which was then compounded by Grover Cleveland's death 4 years later. She eventually married an art history professor, Thomas Jex Preston Jr., in February of 1913, and the wedding was actually celebrated by then First Lady Nellie Taft at the White House. The couple lived in London until World War I, and Mrs. Cleveland Preston continued her advocacy for various causes throughout her life. She made her last public appearance in June of 1946 and passed away in Maryland in October of 1947 at the age of 83, making Frances Cleveland the first First Lady to live longest after leaving the White House than any other First Lady in American history, that being a remarkable 51 years of life post-presidency. Now, what's interesting about Frances Cleveland is her fashion kind of signifies a completely different switch. The bustle was the thing. That was the whole thing until we got to Frances Cleveland. And now it's this kind of A-line dress with an exposed collarbone. Very scandalous, folks. The Women's Christian Temperance Union at her first inauguration was mad that she had the audacity to show her shoulders and her collarbone with her dress. At one point, someone even asked her, well, why'd you do away with the bustle? And she was like, I don't really remember. I just decided I didn't want it, and that's what my dress looked like. But because of this, she completely switched women's fashion, and anyone that maintained a bustle after Frances Cleveland's term was seen as out of style, dowdy, and unfashionable. Harsh, right? So as I said, here's the liver pills. Thank you to the Smithsonian for meticulously preserving and sharing those. Gross. It would be on salves and ointments, anything that they could put her face on to make it look like she uses it, so you should use it too. You'll also see a trading card as she's the Queen of Hearts from one of the campaigns. That picture's center is actually her in her wedding dress. And then one of the gowns we preserve and maintain in our collection, you'll see all the way to the far left, which is a black evening gown. I believe it is made out of velvet. I'll double check my notes at the end though. So, that being said, I've already set the stage. Who doesn't wear a bustle and who gets criticized for the rest of her term as First Lady? Well, it's Caroline Harrison. She is often regarded by historians as the most underrated First Lady in U.S. history. Caroline Carey Scott Harrison's contributions to American history and culture have been widely overlooked because she was situated between Frances Cleveland's 2-year non-consecutive terms. It's a tough act to follow. And unfortunately, we see this with Lady Bird Johnson following Jacqueline Kennedy as well. It's a tough act to follow when there's a media sensation before you. Now, despite this, Caroline Scott Harrison was a very progressive woman despite being seen as out of date, dowdy, and unfashionable. She was very forward-thinking, born in Oxford, Ohio, into a family that was committed to equality, especially when it came to women's access to education. Her family supported education for everyone, as well as abolition of enslavement. She was known for her, quote, dancing brown eyes, and her vibrant personality, and Carey captured the attention of the very serious Benjamin Harrison, who in fact transferred from his college in Cincinnati to Miami University to be closer to her. They married in 1853 after she had recovered from an unspecified illness while working as a music teacher in Kentucky. The couple then moved to Indianapolis, where the Civil War, as it did for many Americans, completely disrupted their lives. While Benjamin Harrison gained acclaim in his military and legal careers during the Civil War, Caroline Harrison managed their home, raised their children, and actively supported local charities. An accomplished pianist and artist, Caroline Harrison hosted musical gatherings and took painting lessons from renowned artist Paul Putzke. So much so, she was that talented, she later even exhibited her own work at the Indiana Exposition. Her charm and her openness proved to be invaluable during her husband's political campaigns, and she served as a gracious First Lady after Harrison was elected as president in 1888 despite losing the popular vote. A champion for equality and progress, Mrs. Harrison was deeply involved in numerous causes that reflected her modern thinking. She insisted on the installation of electricity in the White House and oversaw its modernization. So we can thank Caroline Harrison for the fact that there were even lights on during this time. She demonstrated her commitment to modernization by personally overseeing this project, and she even lobbied Congress herself for further renovations to the executive mansion, although her ambitious plans were ultimately denied, including the addition of an east and west wing. Despite this setback, she successfully managed the modernization of the kitchens, renovations, she re-wallpapered, she refloored, and she enhanced the functionality of the residence as a whole. Her artistic talents extended to her love of china painting, which she opened her classes to anyone in the DC area, especially women, with her former teacher, Paul Pupsky. She created an inventory of White House china from years past, rescuing many pieces from neglect, and even designed the china pattern for her husband's administration that you see here. It's beautiful. They have it preserved at the White House. It is navy blue, kind of royal blue with the corn husks working their way around as a nod to their Midwest upbringings. She also helped to fundraise for Johns Hopkins University Medical School with the condition that they receive the funds upon their admittance of women to the medical school. The meticulous record keeping that she maintained in the White House of the china was something that was later actually used by Jacqueline Kennedy as she preserved the White House in the 1960s. An advocate for women's rights, Caroline Harrison also co-founded and served as the first President General of the Daughters of the American Revolution, or the DAR, in 1890. So if anyone is a DAR member, you can thank Mrs. Harrison for that as well. This organization played a crucial role in promoting patriotism and historical education, and she used her position to further the cause of women's involvement in civic life. Caroline Harrison's commitment to social causes included the supporting of education and health care for women. She hosted elegant receptions and joyous gatherings at the White House, and she used her platform to advocate for issues closest to her heart, despite facing personal illness and tragedy. Notably, she also introduced the first ever Christmas tree in the White House and lifted a long-standing ban on dancing in the White House that had been put in place by Sarah Polk in the 1840s. Now, her dedication to these causes showcased a progressive mindset and left a lasting impact on the role of First Lady, thus setting a precedent for future generations. Okay, before I move on, I want to talk about this really quick. So I pointed out the china pattern. You'll see here a stereo view card of the White House following some of the modernizations she added. And then I love these two pictures here. The first, the black and white, is her with the first cohort of the Daughters of the American Revolution following its founding. And the picture you see up here is actually a hand-painted orchid crafted by Caroline Harrison when she moved into the White House. It is signed, it has her silhouette. She dedicated it to the wives, mothers, and daughters of America, donated it to a national magazine, so that anyone who was subscribed to the magazine could cut out the page and have their very own piece of First Lady art. Excellent. Oh, making me so annoyed. So her fashion, although seen as outdated, still does embody what other women, especially older women, were wearing. And she was somewhat older when she took the role of First Lady. She definitely wasn't a 21-year-old who just got married. I love this piece right here. We had it on display last year. It's a hand-painted fan with mother of pearl spokes by Caroline Scott Harrison. The focus being a purple pansy, and you'll see the iridescent style of that mother of pearl, a very popular accessory of the Gilded Age. I also love her matching bonnet and handbag, which has green and black plumes, as well as a matching purse with the brand new plastic for its clasp celluloid. Now, I will say the purple paisley gown you see all the way at the far, I guess my right, your left, I'm personally not the biggest fan of. I see where she got a little criticized. The layering is just not something I think I could pull off. But she always looked very fabulous, and the purple has a lovely element for the bustle. What I enjoy most about this center image is that, one, we have extensive documentation on where she wore this morning gown, which was actually worn to a politician's family's funeral. So we have documentation of her wearing it while she is First Lady. And then it is adorned with a paisley velvet capelet that is adorned with carnival beading, which is kind of this iridescent beading popular at the time that, depending on which way the light hits it, has those very famous Mardi Gras colors of purple, gold, and green. So despite her being criticized for her fashion, I still think she had great style. No. There we go. I'm almost done, I promise. This is one of our last First Ladies of the Gilded Age. Thanks for sticking it out with me. Now, Ida Saxton McKinley, as I said, she's considered our hometown hero. We preserve and maintain her childhood home and birthplace, where she was born in June of 1847, and came from an extensively affluent family with abolition and Union sympathies. As such, Ida Saxton was afforded extensive educational opportunities that were unusual for women of her time. Influenced by her paternal grandfather and her very progressive teacher, Betsy Mix Cowles, who was the founder of two women's organizations in the Canton area, including a women's anti-slavery society. As such, influenced by these individuals, Saxton developed a strong sense of social responsibility and a belief that her privilege should and can be used for public good. Her intelligence and skills in mathematics and financial management set her apart from many women and ended up leading her to work as a clerk and cashier at her father's Stark County Bank, where in his absence she served as acting manager. The Saxton family was somewhat seen as atypical for their time, as it emphasized education and advancement for women, which we're seeing in trending with a lot of these first ladies already. But for many, locally, it was weird. As the eldest of three, Ida Saxton attended the Brook Hall Seminary in Media, Pennsylvania, alongside her younger sister Mary. And this experience furthered her understanding of the world and social issues. At the age of 22, she and Mary then embarked on a grand tour of Europe, which was a journey typically reserved and afforded to young college men. During their travels, Ida Saxton became acutely aware of the struggles faced by working women, particularly influenced by the plight of Belgian women who would handcraft lace in poor conditions and dank basements. This experience ignited her passion for supporting working women and women's causes. Ida Saxton's life took a significant turn when she met Union Army Major William McKinley. Their courtship was founded on mutual respect and intellectual compatibility, with her asserting that her decision to marry him was entirely of her own volition when he proposed. They wed in January of 1861 and welcomed their first child, Catherine, known later as Kate or Katie, in December of that year. Unfortunately, their early marriage was marked by significant tragedy as Ida McKinley faced profound losses, including the death of her mother, some of her grandparents, and then both of her children, including the death of their beloved firstborn, Katie, who was the apple of their eye. These events not only impacted her mental health, but also her physical health and led to the onset of debilitating seizures. It is believed that actually she suffered from a very severe case of preeclampsia with her second marriage, and baby Ida, as she was known, born in 1873, was born premature and very sickly, and it's believed actually that this is all the result of preeclampsia itself. Now, despite these health challenges and personal losses, Mrs. McKinley remained a steadfast political confidant to her husband as he rose through the ranks of public service, and she even participated in his presidential campaigns when she was well enough to do so. As First Lady of the United States, Ida Saxton McKinley emerged as a pioneering advocate for women's rights, particularly becoming the first ever First Lady in American history to publicly declare her support for women's suffrage. Prior to the ratification of the 19th Amendment, no other First Lady leading up to her had ever outright spoken in support of, or not in support of, but the fact that she did so was a pretty big deal. In fact, she even met with Susan B. Anthony at the White House to talk about suffrage. She was influenced by her early experiences, including her education, her exposure to progressive ideals, and she recognized that there was an importance in having women have a voice in the political sphere. Through interactions with suffragettes like Susan B. Anthony, she utilized her platform to raise awareness and mobilize support for the suffrage movement and demonstrated her commitment to gender equality. In addition to her advocacy for suffrage, Ida McKinley was deeply committed to social welfare initiatives and supported the Crittenden House, which provided assistance to homeless and unemployed women, reflecting her belief in the importance of community support and compassion for those in need. Her involvement in the American branch of the Salvation Army further exemplified her dedication to social causes as she worked to uplift marginalized populations and help to improve their living conditions. Ida McKinley is probably most known for her hand-crocheted slippers, which she contributed her artistic talents to fundraisers and uses her skills to aid those in need. Because of her seizures and because of some issues that I can't get into without going way over my hour-long allotment, Ida McKinley, alongside suffering those episodic seizures, would seek treatment from several different doctors, one of who over-medicated her, providing unregulated bromides, which are today still used as horse tranquilizers. Another doctor believed that her brain as a woman was being overworked, so she was put in solitary confinement. And it wasn't until she went to the White House that a doctor said, we have to stop all of that and try something different, because clearly this is not stopping your seizures. And at that point, she was suffering immensely from bromide intoxication or poisoning. So despite her health, she would regularly, because of muscle weakness and her seizures, she would regularly be seen confined to a rocking chair where she crafted over 3,000 of these hand-crocheted slippers. So now these small acts of kindness and artistic resonated deeply within her community and established her as a very compassionate figure dedicated to helping others. And her influence extended beyond the domestic world. She advocated for the appointment of a woman to the American delegation at the Paris Exposition, recognizing the need for female representation on an international stage. Now, despite these seizures that sometimes confined her to a chair or a rocking chair, Ida McKinley remained actively engaged in public life, showcasing her resilience and unwavering commitment to advocacy. Now, tragically, her life took an additional devastating turn when her husband, President William McKinley, was assassinated in 1901. McKinley, deeply affected by this loss, returned to Canton, Ohio as a widow, where she entered a period of Victorian mourning, following which she resumed normal public activities and even used her position to help reward folks that tried to help her and her husband during his last few moments. Although she was looking very much forward to her husband's memorial dedication, she passed away just months before the McKinley Memorial Mausoleum was opened, and she died in May of 1907 in her late 50s, leaving behind a legacy of strength, while also leaving a legacy behind of a commitment to women's rights. For the longest time, Ida McKinley has been, actually up until 2024, the whitehouse.org has a bio of every First Lady. And up until the summer of 2024, they still listed Ida McKinley as a permanent and petulant invalid. This proves right here that she was not, in fact, an invalid. Although she may have been confined to that rocking chair, she was not permanently handicapped. Although it is believed she may have used a walking cane or even some early accessible tools, including a wheelchair, she still could very much walk. This is her and William McKinley at their 10-year wedding anniversary, not just hiking, but hiking in the Sierra Nevada mountains. She was not permanently invalid despite this reputation, and she's one of our first ladies to really be seen on the campaign trail. You'll see a button here. You'll also see one of those pairs of crocheted, handcrafted slippers, an early campaign button, and even a newspaper clipping detailing her meeting with Susan B. Anthony at the White House. Finally, I want to talk about her fashion because we are completely on the brink of a brand new generation. We started off with Lucy Hayes, who still kind of has that Civil War style. We've completely started to move into the early 1900s with Ida McKinley's attire. The bustle is completely gone at this point. I don't think people are wearing them at all anymore by 1901 when she stops her time as First Lady. So you'll see this is a three-piece gown. It's navy blue with crewel beading. And it's interesting because they're like three pieces. Where's the third piece, Steph? So it is a bodice, the skirt, and then the collar itself that goes around that high neck with that crewel beadwork is actually the third piece and would snap in the back. So she wasn't trying to, put it around her head or anything like we do today. And that's just one of several dresses that we own and preserve of Ida McKinley's because she's, our hometown hero. You'll also see this piece down here. Like, what is that? It is the lace accessory from one of her inaugural gowns that she actually would remove the lace collar from and put on other dresses to make it a little bit classier and dress it up a bit more. You'll see an additional pair of those handcrafted slippers, and these are actually newborn booties that came to us in summer of 2024 from a family in Cleveland who discovered them with a note. They came from First Lady Ida McKinley for their, I believe it was great-grandfather or great-grandnephew, who unfortunately himself was born stillborn, so the booties were never worn. Tragic, as were many parts of Ida McKinley's life and several of these First Ladies. We recognize that First Ladies are very much human just as much as we are. They go through their triumphs and their tragedies. I will say a triumph, she had great fashion sense. The toque at the far end is a black toque, a different type of hat. The bonnet is also no longer a popular accessory. Instead, it's this similar hat, but fully on top of the head. It is adorned with silver plumes and ribbon. I want to make a note here because I do other programs about first ladies after this, where feathers continue to be a highly sought after accessory. The Abaddon Society, which still exists today, was actually founded around this time period because so many pieces of fashion were using feathers, and synthetic feathers were not quite a thing yet. Florence Harding, who I talk about in my Ohio First Ladies program, it is actually believed that she would only use feathers of already deceased birds because she was such an animal rights advocate. So the fashion changes, the women changes, the times change. These first ladies embody a lot of complicated and complex moments in history, as well as the experience of American womanhood. The Gilded Age in itself was a time of great change, rapid industrialization, growing inequality, as well as evolving roles still for women in society. The first ladies of this era reflect these transformations and have each shaped or responded to the challenges of their time. We know that Lucy Hayes set a moral example, championing temperance and social welfare while rejecting sometimes the extravagance of the era. Lucretia Garfield embodied the rise of educated women advocating for equality even in the face of personal tragedy. Ellen Arthur represents the influence of social circles on American politics during this time, although never living to see her husband's presidency. Frances Cleveland was one of America's first media sensations in the modern era, using her celebrity to connect with working women and to promote higher education. Caroline Harrison embraced modernity, bringing electricity to the White House while championing women's professional opportunities. And Ida McKinley defied expectations, supporting women's suffrage and working class causes despite her own personal and health challenges. Together, these first ladies reveal how women in the Gilded Age navigated societal constraints, shaped public life, and laid the groundwork for future reform. Though some embraced traditional roles, others pushed boundaries, and each left a legacy that speaks to the complexity of power, influence, and progress during such a pivotal moment in American history. The Gilded Age may have been defined by wealth and corruption, but these women proved that leadership isn't always gilded. In fact, it's found in resilience, advocacy, and quiet but powerful change. So thank you very much for letting me speak today about Gilded Age gals. May I answer any questions for you at this time? Yes.
We did, like you say, you never saw very much. One little bit, I bet I was really surprised to learn she was thinking about leaving them.
Yes.
That's pretty stunning.
I don't know if anyone's seen the new Death by Lightning Netflix drama series about James A. Garfield's assassination. Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, it was really,
Mm-hmm. Oh gosh, they did a really good but horrible job of showing just how graphic it really was. If you have not seen it, it is a 4-part episode. It's 4 parts, 1 hour each, and it's just the days leading up to and the days that kind of follow James A. Garfield's assassination. But Chester A. Arthur features heavily in it, as they are not actually the best friends politically. But you kind of see this arc as Chester Arthur mourns the loss of his wife, and then also this president, and what he does then as president afterwards. I will say there are some historical inaccuracies that I can't not acknowledge. I feel bad for my poor fiance. At one point they said, "Oh, we're going to DC, the cherry blossoms." And I was like, "Nope, that wasn't until 1911." And he was like, "Okay, calm down." And then at one point he looked and he goes, "Did that really happen?" And I was like, "See, you want my expertise here." And there's a lot of things that were taken with artistic leisure, but overall still really well done. The fact that they even had Lucretia Garfield and Dr. Edson in it, I think is huge. Yes.
Doctor who recognized the importance of cleanliness and
Yes.
disinfection. Garfield.
Yes, so
And
Dr.
they didn't listen to her. You said.
As far as we know, because she was the family doctor and a woman, she wasn't taken as seriously as the official appointed White House doctors and surgeons. What's interesting is Dr. Susan Edson was the 7th woman in American history to get a physician's degree, and she got it from the Cleveland Homeopathic College. A lot of people believe that, and it's interesting that Lucretia Garfield even used the word discrimination in that period, because that was not a common thing to be targeting. Yeah. Yes. Other questions or comments, or if you watched the Garfield assassination Netflix short, tell me what you thought of it.
Funny or no?
That's a great question. I'm not sure. There's several different Cleveland organizations that have since been destroyed. At one point, Ida McKinley herself attended a Cleveland school, and it no longer exists, unfortunately. So I'm not sure, but I'd have to look into that. That's a good question.
I'm a little familiar, but I don't know, there's so many different things.
Well, there's so many different.
The first lady supported women's rights and were anti-slavery. That was interesting to me. I hadn't realized that.
They're very complex because fashion, it's the first time that designers decided to break with the corset. Which is really fascinating.
So she could be heavy like her husband.
Well, she warned him several times, stop eating.
He was the one that had to make a special bathtub in the White House for her.
Yes, and
'cause he was so big.
unfortunately died from heart conditions. But yeah, they're so much like us. You know, they nag their husbands like we do, and and they joke around in letters, and sometimes they're a little heavy, as we all are. But they are so refreshingly human, and we don't talk about them enough. Yes.
Remind me which first lady wasn't for suffrage?
Oh, so that was Mary McElroy, which was Ellen Herndon Arthur's sister.
Okay, so it wasn't.
So it was Chester A. Arthur.
So she wasn't truly a first lady.
It's tough.
She was a hostess.
She was an official White House
A
hostess.
hostess.
And we do talk about every White House hostess as much as every first lady, because in the case of President Buchanan, there was no first lady. And so his White House hostess is his first lady, but she's his niece. And there are several presidents that have a second wife. And so there are two first ladies or White House hostesses like Wilson, and Tyler.
Well, that's good.
Well, thank you all for joining me today.